How's that look?
Yeah, all good.
Awesome.
Give me one minute. I think all. Yeah, they are there. You can start.
Awesome. Straight in?
Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you, Malka, for inviting me to speak today. I'll be talking to everybody about managing incidents and removing human faults and exploits through device management and CICD for IoT. Innovation is just creativity applied with technology. I like to start a lot of my lectures with that quote because the idea is critical in cybersecurity. Because as white hats, we need to be creative and innovative to protect against hundreds, thousands, or more flaws in solutions that we write or protect, whereas malicious actors may only need to successfully hit one vulnerability to be effective. Hello, everybody. I'm Josh. I'm the National Practice Lead for Internet of Things and Digital Twins at Modus, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect working primarily in IoT and digital twins, but also cloud, data, smart industry, emerging tech, and cyber. Today, I'll be talking to you about security in IoT and how you can use device management and CICD to enhance the quality of your IoT solutions. Before I start, I just want to note that this presentation will be focusing more on the technical side of these principles, which is why I'll be more talking about CICD and I won't be going into much detail about DevOps or DevSecOps, which includes a great deal of cultural organizational practices and principles that I won't be touching on. So first off, what is device management within the context of IoT? Effectively, it's a collection of capabilities and practices revolving around the management of a device. Surprising, I know. There are a few different lists and inclusions, but generally when I talk about device management in IoT, I usually group them into these 5 categories: provision and configure, authenticate and secure, command and control, monitor and report, and update and maintain. Device management makes all of these processes much simpler by orchestrating and managing the devices at scale. Different tools and systems allow you to do things such as bulk configuration, automatic provisioning of device, consolidating data and reports, and also do things like bulk patches and updates to hundreds of thousands of devices very easily, rather than having to SFTP to script to each device and then individually SSH it to execute or write a script to do it for you. The first of the practices I mentioned is the provisioning and ongoing configuration of a device. This includes tasks such as registering new devices and creating their unique device reference, configuring settings such as device and network settings, imaging the device to your desired state, and it should include removing any off-the-shelf or out-of-the-box configuration or settings. Authenticate and secure is the next component. It's fairly self-explanatory, but most of these are. It includes setting up device authentication. So how will it communicate and authenticate when talking to the cloud or receiving from the cloud? And if required, how do you securely communicate with other devices? It also includes securing a device with security policies and removing any policies or authentication means that come with the device out of the box, such as default username and passwords for admin. The command and control section of device management refers to how you issue commands and control the device. This can include any commands you want to execute in a shell, scripts, or programs. An example of this would be issuing a reboot command to correct a faulty state. You can use scripts and applications to do diagnostics and investigations, and generally control the device for tasks when you're not working within the automations that you set up. Monitoring and reporting is important for any system really that you maintain. Here we collect the metrics, data, events, and logs about everything from system, performance, applications, and security notices like access attempts or network traffic. You can do a few things, you can do a few different things with all this data depending on the capability of the device. You could possibly aggregate it, analyze it, and alert on it locally, or you might send some, all, or aggregations, including important events, to the cloud for further analytics. Threat and security monitoring is included here. And finally, the update and maintain. This component of device management makes it super easy to push out updates and patches, including firmware, software, and security, to a large number of devices automatically. You can maintain the currency of your devices, applications, and system at scale very easily. So how does having a central device management solution actually help protect you in terms of security? Firstly, it provides an easy and even automated way of keeping all your devices updated and consistent. You can push out patches automatically to all appropriate devices, or you can target specific devices or groups to do gradual rollouts, as well as flagging any outdated devices. The second point is by minimizing manual processes and ensuring that you manage everything through a central platform, you know there won't be human error on new or modified devices. Or if there is, it's because you didn't spend enough time developing hardened processes up front and you kind of have it coming. And if you utilize a central command center, you gain the benefit of all the alerts and monitoring results coming together so that you don't have to search through or alert on individual logs and repositories. Having centralized authentication management means that you can have consistently high security across the board for all of your devices, and you can use unique high-link authentication keys. So if there is a breach of a device, it only affects a single device. Furthermore, if you utilize key rotation on all devices, then the service will regularly change the keys so that unauthorized access will not last long, even if it goes undetected. Well, went right back. There you go. When you get a new device type, you should spend the time figuring out what the default settings are, configs, and access. All of the ones that open you up to exploitation or come out of the box. After this initial investigation phase, all the new devices of that type can be automatically reconfigured to remove those vulnerabilities. And finally, when offboarding devices, it's very important that you know all the necessary steps are taken to flash and wipe the devices so that you're not leaving any data on those devices that can be recovered. So device management not only helps you prevent incidents, but it also helps you respond to them. If a device becomes infected, it only takes seconds to flash the device and restore it to a clean base state, unless somehow the bad actor has managed to escalate privileges to the host or firmware level. But it will allow you to give you time to figure out how the device was breached without it propagating from that device or gathering too much information. And on that, you can minimize propagation. Some device managers can create isolated secure connections and cut off the device from the network to ensure that no traffic goes out from that infected device to any other device and no data is exfiltrated. And finally, once you've bought some time doing that isolation and cleaning, you can use the monitoring data and logs that you've been gathering to understand the vulnerability and patch it out, or isolate other devices with that same vulnerability until a fix can be deployed. Alrighty then, so what is CICD? Continuous integration, and for the purpose of this talk, continuous delivery. Continuous integration is the practice of frequently merging working code into your trunks. By keeping the delta between your trunks and branches as small as possible, you can avoid merge hell, as well as enabling early and frequent testing, so days or weeks of work doesn't end up breaking the build. CD can mean continuous delivery or deployment. Continuous delivery is the practice of delivering small, ready-to-deploy updates. These updates will go through the pipelines with any tests, QA, security automations, policies that you've added and will be released when you specify. Continuous deployment is the other term that CD may refer to. It differs from continuous delivery in that changes are deployed automatically once they pass through the pipeline, rather than after a specified condition, timeframe, or manual acceptance. So how does CICD protect you? Well, there are many different ways that it can, and a big component of that is minimizing human error. By applying the rules, tests, and checks to all code put through the pipeline, you firstly ensure that these steps aren't skipped, maybe because somebody's overly confident in their ability or they're just lazy. But you also prevent bad code from entering the downstream environments. Bugs, vulnerabilities such as API keys stored in code or non-compliant packages can result in the commit failing and preventing that code from being pushed through. An example would be somebody accidentally leaving their test API key in a committed file or using a vulnerable package by mistake. But those and other human error opportunities are minimized. The second great thing is that the environment promotion path must be followed. Nobody can push directly to production or downstream environments. The code must transition and pass all checks in dev, test, QA, whatever you have before it makes it to pre-prod and prod. This means you won't have to deal with the embarrassing a junior push to commit to main on a Friday afternoon issue. And finally, CICD pipelines will include good ones will include the infrastructure as code. You can run compliance, security, and many other static analysis on your infrastructure itself. You can make sure that storage buckets or blobs don't have anonymous access. Databases are always deployed in a private virtual network. It can prevent somebody accidentally creating a public-facing data store, which is the result of many of the data breaches that we've seen in the past. Awesome. Now this section takes a hard pivot from what we've been talking about so far to have a quick look into the types of companies that you can go into after or even before graduation. Broadly, I'll provide a short look at the differences into going into a startup, going to a consultancy, or into industry. I'll just be going through how the company types differ in terms of diversity of responsibility, risk, of taking a role there, whether you become a specialist or generalist, the pay and the advancement. And this is absolutely my own opinions from talking to people who have gone through all three of these options. I went straight into consulting from university and advanced purely through that. I have good friends who went into industry and stayed, friends who went into consulting and industry and vice versa. Even one friend that went to industry to startup to consulting. It's also different to provide a perspective because every company and leader you work for will be different, but I try to keep it general. For diversity of responsibility, it's no secret that at a startup, you'll likely be responsible for or doing a lot of things that may not be exactly what you specialized in. The reality is that if you only have 5 to 10 people in a company, it doesn't make sense to hire specific people to do some stuff, so it gets distributed around. In consulting, you can have huge diversity and responsibility as you transition between projects or different accounts, and you may be in a long-running project and specialize for years. I've worked in GCP doing virtual assistants, AWS building cool stuff for 3D printing, medical grade wearables in Azure. I've architected responses to tenders and I've evaluated responses to tenders. At the same time, I have a colleague who worked for 10 years in a project team with the same tech stack because that's what he enjoys doing. In industry, you typically have a defined job description and you'll work to it. You may laterally move or get a promotion that means new responsibilities, but it's not as common to jump around like it is in consulting or startups. The risk. So for startups, it's obviously much riskier. There are many different risks that come with it. There's the risk of running out of funding, being acquired, being too expensive so you're replaced. There's many different things. In consulting, there's still a degree of risk. Consulting can be quite brutal if you're a severe underperformer. You might actually be asked to leave. But especially in considering large cyber consultancies or technology consultancies like Modus, there's not much risk of being bought out or running out of funding, stuff like that. In industry, the risk is even lower, but still never zero. Your product might be discontinued and you don't find a lateral position. The tech stack you specialized in might become obsolete. There could be cutbacks to a tech department if you're in a tech department attached to a company. There's even the risk of outsourcing to a consultancy or an offshore delivery team, but it's still significantly lower than startups. As with responsibility, in terms of specialization, startups will often create well-rounded generalists from your experience in all those different responsibilities. Consulting often creates what's called a T-shape, where you have a broad skill set at a foundational level, and then you've specialized in a specific field. And industry generally creates specialists who work with the same tech stack or technologies and become experts. In pay, startups are likely to be lower up front, but they might have significantly high rewards later on. When you're compensated in stocks or something that could potentially be worth a lot of money when the company scales. Consulting and industry both vary hugely, as you can imagine. It depends on your specialty, demand of skills, seniority in the job market. And finally, advancement. Although tech suffers from really bad title inflation, you can be the victim of being left behind if you don't have a title that reasonably describes your skill, experience, and value. Startups can be highly variable, but due to the much flatter hierarchy, you may not advance in titles as there's no need for a graduate, junior, senior architect, principal architect, and CTO when your company only has 10 people. Industry and consulting are much more hierarchical. So every couple of years, generally you would advance and have an advancement in your title to demonstrate that. So with all that being said, Malka asked if I could provide some of my thoughts about startups. I was trying to think about a perspective that you may not have heard 1,000 times. So I arrived on Josh's 3 types of tech startups. Once again, these are my thoughts and to be taken with a hint of facetiousness. So any colleagues or friends, past, present, or future, don't come at me. The experienced leaders setting up their own shop startup. So this is formed by multiple skilled people who leave a company to start their own business. They bring their experience, expertise, and reputations. Because they're now a lean startup, they're able to bill rates to clients at a much lower rate than the large companies they came from. But they can still offer the same quality and expertise that they did at those higher bill rates. As far as startups go, these are great to be involved in because of the flat hierarchy. Gives you the opportunity to work closely with someone who has a lot of experience and insights. Pay will probably be an industry standard and you may get equity. The business major with an app idea. I think most people in tech have probably been approached by their business major mate who says they have a groundbreaking idea for an app. It's like Uber for X as a service. These are typically formed because the founders want to be rich entrepreneurs, and often the solution is created first and then the founder tries to figure out what problem it solves. I don't have any examples of these because I haven't heard, or I can't think of a successful one off the top of my head. That's not to say don't start a startup with a mate who has a business degree. I have a very good experience of doing exactly that. Just be cautious about people's intentions. The group of mates. This is your common startup story about one or more people who have an idea to solve a problem that they think can change the world. Google, Facebook, Canva are the obvious big ones. Depending on funding and how early you get in, you could be getting pure equity, pure salary, or a combination of both. I know a bunch of friends who are at Atlassian getting stock options before they went public, and they're all really happy that they went over for that now. And internships. So just wanted a really quick one with a few tips on internships. Target big companies. Obviously, bigger companies more often than not will mean more positions. Try to demonstrate extracurricular experience. If you have any side projects, you've competed in CTFs or competitions, hackathons, or you go to conferences, these are all great to make you stand out. And freelance on web platforms to gain experience. Internships were the traditional way of getting experience, but now freelance platforms can be a good way to build out your portfolio to differentiate yourself when you apply for jobs. Awesome. The more astute of you will have noticed that this page doesn't quite look like the others. As I mentioned before, I'm very big in smart industry as one of my specialties, and my passion for smart industry and IoT is what led me to work for Modus. In case some of you haven't heard of Modus, we have over 30,000 employees worldwide in 20 countries. We actually recently announced a merger with Akka Technologies, which when completed will result in a headcount of over 55,000 employees. And Modus will be the second largest engineering R&D company in the world. Modus generally deals with everything from the engineering itself to technology solutions and consulting. We have Tech Academy, which deals with training and upskilling, innovation labs, project management, and business consulting. As far as Australia goes, we have a specialty on the technology solutions and consulting, and we have 1,200 consultants in the country. These all range from project managers, architects, business analysts, and cybersecurity specialists. We're also a specialist in the smart industry field, and we're the Mercedes Formula E engineering partner, so the electric vehicle Mercedes Formula team. And that team actually took home the gold this year, which was very exciting for my colleagues in Europe who actually got to go and watch the races in person. I was pretty jealous. And very abruptly, that is the end of my lecture. Here are the slide credits for this deck that has become my staple. And thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you got some value out of it, and feel free to follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn. I'm much more active on LinkedIn than Twitter. I think we have a little bit of time for questions.
Thank you, Joshua. Guys, questions for Joshua?
I've got to figure out how to stop sharing. That's great.
Any question, guys? Yep. Guys, questions? Guys, sorry, Josh.
Stunned into silence.
Yes, they are very. It's kind of very shy. So do you take the interns students for the interns?
I don't actually know. I thought about that just as I was saying it. I know we have a graduate program where we do rotations across 3 accounts, but I'll have to find out and I'll let you know. Otherwise, I know my experience at Big Four, so PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, and EY. I know they've all got fairly well-established internship programs. Deloitte and PwC both have really great cyber teams. So
that's very, very competitive. I heard in both
very
places.
competitive.
Yeah. It's very not easy to get that.
Yeah,
so
that's
however,
where your extracurricular stuff would really make you stand out.
Correct. And even getting a volunteer position, I think still there's an advantage for students, I believe, rather than doing nothing.
Yeah, that's a careful
experience.
one. Because in Australia, it's illegal for somebody to work unpaid unless it's through they're being accredited through like a educational institution, or the value that they're being provided in that position exceeds the value that they're bringing. So a lot of companies will just avoid it, especially startups, which is how I know this. I looked into it for one of mine. A lot of companies would just avoid it entirely because it can be very risky legally for them.
Oh, right. That is a good tip as well. Any question, guys? I think the very informative, your talk is very informative. Just thank you so much. It's very clear.
Thank you, Jerry.
It's clear. Thank you so much. Yes. Thanks all.
Thanks a lot. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Fake it till you make it, Owen. All right. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.